Hi, this is Ashish R. Bedekar, and welcome to my podcast, The ARB Show. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Jennifer. Global CEOs call her a M&A Whisperer. The title comes from her working with advising leaders and organizations on the unexpected people challenges of mergers and acquisitions. And as you know, these challenges can really doom a deal, but that's rarely covered in M&A preparedness training. She has written a best selling book, Now What? A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisition. And she has a consultancy called Day One Ready, which was founded on the premise that M is for mindset and A is for agile. And through one-day workshops and keynotes, she has prepared hundreds of CEOs, executives, and middle managers to recognize the need of people factors in M&A. She is a well-renowned and a global expert, and it's really an honor to have her on the show. Thank you, Jennifer, for being a guest on the show.
Ashish, I thought you were going to skip my bio and just say, here's how I know Jennifer, to share our path.
Yeah. So we were colleagues in Navtech, and we have been keeping in touch, and I thought seeing her fantastic work, she would be a great guest on the show. And thanks, Jennifer, for accepting the invite, and really look forward to hearing your thoughts on what are the top 5 people tips in M&A. Over to you. Floor is yours, Jennifer.
Well, and Ashish, I think you'll recognize some of the stories, at least, from
yeah, true.
Navtech.
Yeah.
But what would you like me to cover first? As we know, there's so much you can cover in mergers and acquisitions, particularly because some of my stories will come from our Navtech time. I would love for you to be able to share your own perspective on some of these.
True. So, I mean, maybe just start, because since we talk of, people and people get affected by communication. So maybe just start with, what's the importance of having a transparent two-way communication? Because typically you hear a one-way, information broadcast, right? Yeah, maybe just start with that. That could be a good way to get started.
Well, there's a couple of things around communication that I do think is unique to a merger and an acquisition, and Ashish, you can certainly share. First, I'm not the first merger and acquisition consultant to say communication is important. That's rather obvious. But how you communicate and the type of communication that you do is critically important, and it's a little bit different than your standard communication that the company does when everyone's clear on the objectives, you have a strategy, and you're all just executing. As you know, during a merger and acquisition, there's a lot of uncertainty. You have a strategy that's untested. You are bringing two companies together. You are, even if they're both B2B, both B2C, you are still merging two different cultures. And you have a lot of people who are wondering, where is this going? What is the ultimate objective? And so the communication needs to be more precise, and the cadence is different, and the format is different. So when I say precise, it means that when you are communicating, people will automatically be thinking in the back of their head, do I still have a job? Will I still be with the same team? Do I get to keep my title? Will we still have the same benefits? People immediately go to their core needs as part of any merger and acquisition announcement. That's part of the reason why actually CEOs call me M&A Whisperer, because I talk to them about the things that people don't talk about. And I will say, just the term merger and acquisition comes with negative baggage. You need to be prepared for that. You need to know the moment that it's announced, even if you think this is the best deal ever, the majority of your employees will only think that this is terrible news because they've heard all of the negative stories that are around a merger and acquisition. They may have been through one themselves. So your communication, you need to not only over-communicate, but be prepared to answer questions as quickly as you can. And those basic questions that I just articulated, do I still have a job? What team am I on? As much as you can, have answers to those questions. It's why I continually recommend that HR should have a seat at the table as early as possible. Because too often, and Ashish, I'd love for you to weigh in on this, too often what I have seen is that HR is not brought in until the 11th hour, and then suddenly they've got to scramble to make sure that employees have the answers to all these questions, that there is no confusion, and even if they can't have the answers on day one, that they at least have that process in motion to be able to answer those questions. So first, because I've talked in broad strokes, I'll talk more specifically about some of the other suggestions, but would just love to hear your thoughts.
So I've gone through a couple of them myself. So it really resonates. Most of the points which you mentioned, because typically at times there are typically some whispers, right? Some grapevine which says, oh, there's something around the corner. That kind of builds anxiety. Then we possibly have a kind of a mail blast which says, please log into this specific portal, and that's a portal which you haven't used at all, right? It's some very funny sounding.
So it raises suspicions.
Exactly. I've never used this service provider before. Why use this? Then you're supposed to join, and then that's the kind of exposure to what's the news or etc. And maybe during around the same time you'll have some kind of a standard corporate release, or now in the days of social media you kind of get some parallel vibes as well. But here again, to your question which you mentioned, I think over communication is really crucial, because I was just going through the emotions which all of us felt during when Microsoft bought Naptech and Nokia, that whole process, right? So there was this famous burning platform memo which was kind of circulated, and we were supposed to find our strategy or understand how it links with us. It was a very philosophical kind of query, but again it did not answer as to, okay, what's in it for me, why are we doing this, etc. And specifically in the case of Naptech, because we were kind of dealing from the traditional handset business, right? We were a pure B2B play. We were doing fantastic, and in many cases we were actually held back by Nokia in many cases, right? For in many of the issues. So all of those issues, of course, over a period of time, information came in waves, right? And then of course the famous layoff, which also happened after that. So that's the kind of typical experience or typical emotions which happen when you talk of M&A. And say again, I guess there's no straight answer to this, because as at a corporate level, you have to make financial decisions, right? But people are much more than a line on an Excel sheet, right?
Exactly. So it's why I do the work that I do. And what you've articulated, Ashish, is standard with now that I'm on this side. But when you go through a merger and acquisition for the first time, exactly as you just described, right? What is this link? What portal? And people automatically, and that's why I say to CEOs, you have to understand, you're excited about this. You see the potential. Ideally, you have a vision for how this is going to play out. You've done this for a reason, and you'll be able to articulate that. We'll get into that in a minute. But you have to understand that that's not the same energy that people come to this with. The moment that the news is shared, and now I get a link, automatically, I will say the majority of employees think that's a portal that's going to tell me you have 2 weeks and then you're out of here. That's just the assumption that comes with it.
Exactly.
And so the other thing you mentioned, transparency, because there is a misconception that you can't be transparent, that you can't share things with your employees. Either there's a fear you'll lose them. There's the aspect of compliance and regulation. So this is, I recognize that you cannot share certain information in advance, but you need to prepare, and I know we'll get into this in a minute, preparing your middle managers. And when I say middle managers, that's to me is senior leadership who aren't in the room when the deal is made, but who are burdened with the execution, right? Those people who are leading the majority of the workforce.
Right.
I'll share a story because I think it's one of the best examples of how you can be transparent without giving away any confidential information. And it comes from a NavTech interview that I did. As you might imagine, for my book, I interviewed a lot of former NavTech executives and middle managers. And one that really struck me was our customer marketing team. And the head of the customer marketing team in the US shared with the team. So as you recall, our customer marketing, you had automotive, you had telecommunication, you had enterprise. And the automotive team in particular was worried because Nokia was handsets, mobile phones. The instant belief was, well, they won't care about automotive. They won't care about enterprise as much as they care about phones and mobile communication. You and I now know that was completely not true. Like, they loved automotive, but at the time, that was not the case. And so the head of the customer marketing team said, listen, I don't know how this is going to play out. I know this team has a wealth of knowledge. Each of you are specialized in different areas and have a wealth of information. But and this is where I want to really emphasize, but what I want you to do, he said, was not just lead with, I know automotive, I know enterprise. Show how you understand and quickly learn about an industry, that it's not just the industry you know, but your ability to quickly understand what's happening in that industry. What are the trends? What do we need to care about? What is the impact of this on our future plans for NavTech or NavTech Nokia, as it were? And his comment to showcase your skill set and your ability to quickly understand an industry, simplify and articulate what's important, that's what you lead with. And I thought it was such a great way of being very transparent, saying, I don't know how this is going to play out. I know we have a wealth of knowledge, but right now we're in proving ourselves mode. And to prove yourself, don't just stick in what you know. I'm an automotive specialist, but your ability to quickly understand and articulate what is important to the company. And that for me is such a great example of what is communication, transparent communication that will help your team move forward.
No, I think that's a very excellent comment, because let's take, there are two companies when they get into M&A and their product lines or their line of businesses are not conflicting, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
in that case, right, if this kind of attitude, if people kind of absorb and say, okay, this is the thing, this is how I can now adapt and prove myself in adjacent thing, right? And try to maybe, I don't know, maybe just maybe in the day of social media, the best way is to just reach out to the other company, maybe have your peers even before the formal communication, maybe just have some informal hello, hi, this is what we are, this is what we do kind of thing. So while the formal communication and the structured thing happens, you can always create informal networks. And what you said is extremely true even in the age of AI, because one thing
Yes.
which everyone is talking is now it's the era of generalist.
Yeah.
Because you need to know a little bit of everything. And even if you're not an expert in a new in an area which you have never seen before, you need to have the capability of learning and then applying that knowledge and get results. So I think that's excellent. And I think what you mentioned, that a middle manager or people next to the folks who are in the room should have that maturity to translate or try to translate the vision. At the same time, be a kind of a communicator from the ranks to the boardroom, because that's a very crucial aspect as well. Because I'm sure when this gets rolled out, the CEO or whoever is concerned also need to have accurate information and status, right? And more than the status, it's the emotion. How are people feeling, right? Because if people are upbeat, then there is good chance that the M&A will be successful, right? Because sooner or later it all snowballs in a kind of a clash of cultures, right? And when new teams are formed, then then you'll have this factionalism, right? So even though you are now a merged entity, the team may have people from earlier different companies, right, together. And then
Right.
this is the X, he is bringing his own people in this team, or this is from the earlier company, right? So you'll have more factionalism, right? So yeah.
Right. And Ashish, you bring up two really important points that I want to touch on the role of middle managers to translate the vision. You and I both know not all middle managers are created equal. Some are very good at communications, and some, I don't know what's the word, suck. They just aren't, it is not their forte. And so another aspect, and this is what, again, I do in my work, you need to prepare middle managers. Help them have the tools to be able to not only translate what can be a vision at 30,000 feet, but what does that mean to me? What does that mean to me in customer marketing, on the sales team, in product marketing? How do I interpret location-based solutions and understand the role that I play to contribute to that? And so one of the things that I do when working with companies is help to prepare their middle managers, not only for that communication, because again, not all middle managers are good communicators, and that's no knock. You and I both know people who are very good at certain jobs, but communication's not their forte. So you need to help prepare them with the right tools, but also to give them a framework and to pull them in. Help your middle managers who have been, whose feet on the ground, who see what the issues could be, where possible. When I work with CEOs, particularly in middle market businesses, to get the feedback of middle managers, to be able to see, okay, is this strategy, these objectives and strategies reasonable? What's the execution timeline? Because I can't tell you how many times with you've, I'm sure know it from our past days, right? When you have a strategy that's developed from at a very high level, but you don't really know the nuance of what does it take to get all of these things done, the sooner you can involve middle managers to say, okay, well, you only put 3 months for this. This will take us 6 months to even get the processes integrated and set up. So this timeline won't work. Or this, you've got to put 3 times more resources against this because we're working with an old system, or we're working with an old piece of equipment, whatever the situation. And so the sooner you can involve middle managers, and I wrote a Forbes article about this very thing, because I do feel middle managers can make or break your deal. So involving them as soon as you possibly can is critical. One of the other points that you made, though, that I do think is important is the informal networks piece of it. There's a framework and workshop topic that I do that I love. It doesn't go as well in the US, but I would say internationally people love it, is I talk about think like a tourist. If you want cultural integration to work, think like a tourist, a good one. And what is fascinating to me, I've done this in Europe and in Latin America, is people automatically get it. They realize, oh, if I think like a good tourist, it means I try and learn some phrases from the country that I'm going to be visiting. I try and learn about their history. I want to understand what makes them tick. How do they think? I want to know where are the cool places to go? Where are the restaurants to be? What are the museums to see? I really try and understand both their culture and their language. Right? So the looking up the phrases, understanding maybe important words that I need to know, like where's the bathroom, how do I find the metro? But, I laugh about it, but every time I've done that exercise, particularly with people who live, I'll use the European Union as an example, right? There's always a lot of movement, and understanding how people come to their culture, the language that they use, and applying that same mindset to company culture. It's exactly as you described, creating that informal network, getting to know people, sharing a little bit about yourself as you learn more about them. That's what can really accelerate your integration.
Got it. No, in fact, the point which you mentioned gets amplified when when you're talking of, say, multinational organizations, which maybe have headquarters in different countries, right? So
Yep.
along with the corporate culture, you have the national identity, or a kind of ethos, or the work ethic which goes along with it, right?
Yep.
So we have to prepare from all those factors. So what are some other points which you would like to illustrate? We talked about middle managers. Covered the transparent two-way communication per se. Informal definitely is crucial. What's your take on, I think we just mentioned some time back, this address and manage the us versus them mentality, because
Right.
it's a natural thing to happen, but the sooner we kind of get over it, the better it is for the combined entity. So what are some hacks?
And it's interesting, Ashish, because I wrote an article about how to avoid us versus them thinking for Harvard Business Review back in 2018. It was the very first big article that I had in Harvard Business Review, which was thrilling to me. And the reaction to that article was significant. In fact, HBR told me it was one of the more popular M&A articles, and I have since met people at conferences who say, I love that article, I use that in my thesis. So what that means to me, though, is that I tapped into not just something that my research showed me, but that other people had witnessed and experienced. And what the research revealed was there's 3 forms of us versus them thinking, not just one. So the first is the most obvious, the one we typically assume is us versus them, our company versus their company. And it's both sides, right? If I've been acquired, if I'm acquirer, you have this us versus them dynamic. And I know we can, I don't think we need to give examples, but we definitely had that with Navtech and Nokia. We were very proud of what we had achieved on our own. So there was absolutely this us versus them. Who do they think they are, telling us how to do our job? But after that, you also have the executives versus frontline leaders aspect of us versus them thinking. So the executives can, I would say the dynamic in that case is executives who have typically known about the news for a while, but now your frontline leaders are just learning about this for the first time. And so there can be this dynamic of executives thinking, okay, let's go, right? Aren't we ready? Whereas the frontline is thinking, I just learned about this news. I'm still adjusting. I'm still absorbing. What does this mean? And again, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, I've got all these questions. Who made this decision and why wasn't I included? So you have the executive versus frontline leader dynamic that is absolutely underestimated, because oftentimes you'll have frontline leaders who have a very important role within the organization, yet they feel blindsided. In fact, in one of the interviews that I had, the executive felt betrayed. He had been head of sales, was not aware of head of sales for one aspect of the company's work. He was not aware that this was in play and felt blindsided. And so, again, it's why I get called CEO Whisperer, because I'll say there's this dynamic that you need to be prepared for. And then the third is who stays versus who goes. And what was fascinating to me in that particular dynamic is both sides thought the other had a better deal. So those who stayed felt that those who either were let go or walked out on their own, man, I wish I could have gotten that, right? Because sometimes you have it where they get a package and the feeling was, now I've got 3 times as much work because those people are now gone. Now I've got to do all the work that they were doing. So there's this belief that the ones who leave have it better. And then the ones who leave think, well, why didn't I get to stay? Why wasn't my role preserved? I was about to be promoted, and now I'm either leaving of my own accord or I'm part of a layoff. And so that was equally fascinating to me, and that contributes to the us versus them dynamic as well.
Right.
So what's critical is for this discussion, and I'd love your views, is awareness of that. First and foremost, you have to be aware that there are multiple dynamics that are occurring that can cause tension. And if you aren't aware and prepared to address them, again, you accelerate the failure rate.
Exactly.
And that's a big part of what I do, is making leadership aware that this is going to happen.
True.
The better prepared you are, the greater chance for success.
True. Just a thought occurred to me that does it happen that, in the new combined entity, to try to find some commonalities or to try to celebrate some specific early wins, or maybe even institute that, merger day, I don't know, and have a celebration on merger day, and maybe a weekly just talk about how you feel, have some kind of a ritual, because many times people find meaning in rituals, right?
Absolutely.
Because even if there was no merger and acquisition, a simple thing like maybe the whole office comes together to celebrate a birthday, right? Or every week there is some party or some celebration or something other. Those are rituals for bonding and bringing together. So in the context of a merger and acquisition, do such things help to overcome this us versus them kind of mentality? What's your experience on that?
They can, but Ashish, it's an excellent point. Too few companies recognize that. And what I would say is, because I had a CEO who said, well, let's have a celebration when we announce this. Balloons and that you get the mug with the new logo and the t-shirt and all of that. And I said, that is the worst thing you could do. And he was like, well, why? I don't understand. This is a celebration. This is a great opportunity. I said, well, for you, that is absolutely the case. You've been thinking about this deal for a couple of years, and now it's come to fruition. But again, people are just receiving this news for the first time. And you and I both know at Navtech, people at Navtech bled Navtech colors, all right? It was our company. It was our identity. And it's why in my book and in my keynote talk, I talk about the stages of grief you can go through as an employee. Stages of transition, if we don't want to be, too somber. But they are. You have to get from denial to acceptance, because your identity has been wrapped up with that old company. Or I should say, old company, the company you knew, and now it's turning into something else, but you don't know what it's turning into, and you don't know, do I have a role in what this company becomes? So in that case, the power of ritual is incredibly important. I had the privilege of leading one of those rituals with a company in Mexico City. It was a medical lab that I think had 10 different labs throughout Mexico City. They were acquired by a larger medical corporation that had presence throughout Mexico. And the initial acquisition integration was not going well. And fortunately, the woman who was head of the smaller medical lab company that had been acquired reached out to me. In fact, she actually had read my HBR article, reached out and said, I think you can help me. And we did a ritual. She was known for having 12 roses, or actually 24 roses brought into the office each week. And so I said, here's the ritual we will do with just your team. The night before, we were supposed to have a workshop with the greater team leadership. We had a dinner with just her and her team. And I said, I would love for each person to take a rose and share a story. Talk about the company, maybe a funny trade show event, maybe a moment in the office, whatever you want to talk about, but talk about a moment that really is a reminder for you of why you love this company. And what was fascinating is they each told a story about her, what she had done, because the company now being acquired was great, but they had struggled, they were building this over time. And so they each told a story and gave her a rose. And by the end of this, Ashish, I think we had 20 people at a table. The entire room was crying, but you could see the release. It's exactly as you said. It was a ritual that was important to them. And the reason why I feel privileged to do these types of ceremonies, I call them honor and release. You honor the past and you release it. And the woman for whom I did this exercise said, you have given me a gift. I didn't appreciate how much the company has meant to these people. I knew it, but to hear their stories and to share with each other how proud we are of what we created, she said, I do feel we can now move forward because we know what we have created and we have honored that. And so it's incredibly important. And I wish, Ashish, honestly, if I could do that all day long, I would do that exclusively. I'm still trying to promote awareness around the power of ritual in mergers and acquisitions.
Right. No, in fact, very true. Because when you talk of rituals, it's the same passion which your sports team wins, right? That's you feel good, right? And even though in a famous Seinfeld episode, he says, "Oh, your team has not win; they're just wearing T-shirts, right? Which you love and which you empathize and which you see as yours." Right, so it's like that. You try to find identity in and meaning in and purpose in all those things. So that's really great. Does that also link with such rituals in maybe aligning individual goals with the new corporate vision or whatever is planned as per the M&A?
Yeah, because let's think about this. To equate it to a ceremony we all know, right? When you go to a funeral, the passing of a loved one, the funeral helps to start the process of letting go of this person. And people have those same emotions, but in this case, in a work environment, they're letting go of what the company was. And that's why I emphasize the need to get from denial to acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean you are joyous, rapturous, balloons and unicorns and all of that. It just means you have accepted the fact that this change has occurred and it is time for you to move forward. And I always say, everyone will move forward at a different rate. Everyone reacts differently to change and uncertainty. So the power of the ritual is that moment of saying, okay, I need to let go and move forward into the future. And who knows what the future holds? True. It's uncertain. Exactly. But I need to, and this is where I do the next part of my work, is helping people to embrace that uncertainty and recognizing they have more in their control than they think.
Fantastic. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Jennifer, for wonderful insights. And thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. Do subscribe, share, and like this podcast and give it a 5-star rating if you like the content. Bye for now. Talk to you soon.